The rain was not a storm. It was a Boston indecision, a cold mist that smelled of the harbor and old stone, and it clung to everything. I killed the engine of my sedan. The silence of Harborview Cemetery pressing in. My hand, the one holding my phone, would not stop shaking. The screen had lit up 20 minutes ago, a bright rectangle of anonymous light in my dark car. The message was 8 words. The truth is where he rests. Come tonight. It was signed with a single letter. E. For 14 years, I had been chasing the ghost of my father. Now it seemed one of them was texting me. I looked through the windshield, the wipers dragging uselessly against the drizzle, and I saw them. Not ghosts. They were painfully real. 10 men. They were dressed in immaculate black suits, the kind of tailoring that whispers wealth, not shouts it. They stood in a perfect, unbroken circle around my father's grave. Daniel Hale, forensic accountant, Federal Bureau of Investigation, dead at 45. His death certificate said accident. It said his car had lost traction on a wet road. I had read that report until the ink blurred. I never believed it for a second. My heart, usually the steady metronome of a reporter on a deadline, started a frantic, painful rhythm against my ribs. It was trying to count the seconds, but the seconds were stretching too long. One man stood at the head of the grave, near the simple marble stone. He was the center of their intense gravity. I watched him bend, his movements economical and precise. He placed a stark white envelope on the rain-darkened stone. Then he spoke. I was too far away to hear the words, but the cadence drifted toward me on the wet air. It was Italian. It sounded like a prayer, or perhaps a judgment. When he finished, he bowed his head. And as one, all 10 men bowed with him. It was not the slumped shoulder of grief. It was the synchronized dip of soldiers. It was discipline. My instincts took over. I slipped out of my car, easing the door shut without letting it click. The wet grass soaked the knees of my jeans almost immediately. The air was cold, biting. I moved low, crouching behind the broad, weeping wings of a marble angel, the cold stone seeping through my thin jacket from that shadow. I counted the vehicles parked along the narrow access road. 4 black sport utility vehicles, all of them immaculate, all of them facing the exit. I memorized the license plates, knowing they were probably useless. Grief is messy. Grief is awkward and ugly. This was not grief. This was an operation. They moved out just as quickly, just as silently. Doors opened and closed with quiet, expensive thuds. The engines turned over with low rumbles, one by one. The sport utility vehicles pulled away, their red taillights disappearing into the mist. But one man remained. He had been the leader, the one who spoke the Italian. He stood alone, looking down at the headstone, seemingly indifferent to the rain that was starting to plaster his dark hair to his skull. He wore a heavy wool overcoat, the lapels sharp, the lines clean. He had not moved. I should have stayed hidden. I should have waited until he left, retrieved the envelope, and driven to the nearest police station. That would have been the smart move, the safe move. But I am my father's daughter. I inherited his stubborn need to know, his inability to let a lie settle. I stepped out from behind the angel. The sound of my foot on the gravel path seemed impossibly loud. He did not startle. He did not flinch. He simply turned his head, a slow, deliberate motion. He had known I was there. I felt a cold flush of certainty. He had known, and he had waited. Up close, he was all sharp angles and deep shadows. He looked like he had been carved from hard, unforgiving material. His eyes, even in the gloom, were reflective and dark, like wet steel. I knew him, not personally, but I knew the name. Luca Santori. Anyone in Boston who reads the news, the real news behind the society pages, knows that name. His family tree had roots that went deep into the dark soil of this city. He spoke first. His voice was low, textured, the accent not cheap Italian but expensive, educated whiskey, debt paid. He gave a short, sharp nod toward the grave. He saved my life. My own voice came out raw, laced with 14 years of acid rain and cold anger. "He saved your life, so you leave $50,000 on his grave." I gestured at the white envelope, a pale rectangle in the darkness. His eyes narrowed. The only sign of irritation, he showed no surprise that I had guessed a number. "No," he said. His voice was flat. He reached inside his perfectly tailored overcoat. I tensed, every instinct screaming, but I held my ground. He was not reaching for a weapon. He pulled out something small, something that glinted. "That," he said, indicating the envelope on the grave, "is documentation." He held out his gloved hand. "This is the key." I stared at his open palm. It was not a normal key. It was a piece of metal, brushed steel, the size of a credit card but thicker. "I do not understand," I whispered. "He saved it for you," Luca Santori said. His gaze was heavy, unwavering. "He told me to give it to you when you were ready, when you started asking the right questions." "I have always been asking questions." "No. You have been asking about an accident. You're ready to ask about a murder." My breath caught. I reached out and took the metal card. It was cold, heavy. On one side, a long string of numbers was etched into the surface, a safe deposit box. I turned it over. On the other side, just 3 letters, F-E-H, for Emma Hale. It was my father's handwriting. I would know it anywhere. That precise, careful script of an accountant, digitized and carved in steel. A cold dread, sharper than the rain, washed over me. Far away, down by the main road, a siren wailed. It was faint, just a whisper of official trouble. Growing closer. Luca heard it too, his head tilted, listening. He took one step back, breaking the strange intimacy of the moment, putting distance between us. "The man who killed your father is still breathing," he said. His voice was all business now, clipped and hard. "He is still working, right here in this city." "Who?" The word was torn from my throat. "Who?" "The envelope will show you the money," he said, ignoring my question. "The key will show you the proof. My debt to Daniel Hale is paid. What you do now is up to you." He took another step back, melting into the deep shadows of a large, ancient oak tree. He gave me one last, assessing look. "If you want the truth, the real truth, come to this address tomorrow morning." He was gone, but his voice hung in the air, pulling a business card from his pocket and placing it on a nearby bench. "Or do not come at all. Burn the envelope, throw the key in the harbor. Forget this ever happened. It will be safer for you." He disappeared. He did not run. He just vanished between the headstones, as if the cemetery itself had swallowed him. I stood there for a full minute, my hand burning where the metal card rested. The siren was much closer now, turning into the cemetery's main gate. Adrenaline surged. I lunged for the grave, snatching the white envelope from the headstone. I ran, my feet slipping on the wet grass and mud. I threw myself into my car, fumbled with the keys, and locked the doors. My heart was hammering so hard I thought my ribs would crack. I watched in the rearview mirror as the patrol car's lights washed over the angel statue. It slowed, then continued its patrol. I drove to a side street, parked under a flickering streetlight, and killed the engine. Trembling, I tore the envelope open. It was not cash. It was bank statements. Copies of wire transfers, millions and millions of dollars, moving like snakes between shell companies I had never heard of and offshore accounts in places known for secrecy. And at the bottom of the stack, there was a photograph. It was old, grainy, a candid shot. My father, 14 years younger, smiling, holding a coffee cup outside a small cafe. Next to him, looking intense and also holding a coffee, was a much younger Luca Santori. A flash of lightning split the sky, illuminating the cramped interior of my car in a silent, terrifying white. In that split second, I saw everything clearly. The grave, the rain, the key in my hand, the picture of 2 men who should never have known each other. I understood. Tonight was not an ending. It was not a payment of a debt. It was an invitation, a doorway. And I knew, as surely as I knew my own name, that I had just walked through it. This was the point of no return. I leaned my head against the steering wheel. The cheap leather was cold and damp. I thought about Luca Santori, the way 10 men bowed to him, the way he had bowed, in his own fashion, to my father's memory. Fear is different from respect. Fear is what you feel for a rabid dog in an alley. Respect is what you give the apex predator who lets you pass. I was not sure which one I was feeling, standing in front of a monster who knew how to bow at a dead man's grave. It did not matter. I picked up the business card he had left. The address was on the waterfront. Tomorrow morning. I knew exactly where I was going. I did not sleep. Sleep was a luxury for people who had not just held their father's legacy, carved in cold steel, in their hand. I sat in my loft apartment in the South End, the one with the exposed brick and the drafty windows, and I watched the sky over Boston turn from pitch black to a bruised, watery gray. My cat, a gray tabby named Daniel, after him, curled up on my lap, purring, oblivious. He was the only thing in my life that was simple. Boston is a city of contradictions. It preaches its Puritan history from every red brick church and ancient burying ground, but its heart pumps with the cold, hard rhythm of high finance and new technology. It is a city of granite and glass, of old blood and new money. My apartment, a converted industrial space, cost a fortune I barely made. I am a freelance investigative journalist. That is the polite term for it. It means I write the dark, complicated financial stories that staff reporters, with their benefits and their mortgages, are too sensible to touch. I break the ice, as one of my editors puts it. My freelance checks are just enough to feed Daniel and pay the heating bills, which in a Boston winter is no small thing. The city I see is not the one on the postcards. My Boston is the gravestones of Harbor View, the locked doors of Beacon Hill mansions, and the massive, sprawling port. I see the harbor as a river of money, a torrent of steel containers flowing in and out, each one a sealed mystery, a potential story, or a potential coffin. I looked at the envelope from the grave, now sitting on my scarred wooden coffee table. The photograph of my father and Luca Santori stared up at me. I did not need the light of dawn to see it. It was burned into my memory. I was 15 years old. It was a Tuesday afternoon in October. I was trying to figure out algebra. The phone rang. It was a man from the state police. His voice was flat, professional. There had been an accident with my father's car. It had skidded on a wet road, a patch of black ice, he suggested. Though it was not yet cold enough for ice. My father was gone. My mother had left years before that. She could not handle the quiet intensity of a man who hunted numbers for the Federal Bureau of Investigation. She wanted noise and sunshine, and she went south to find them. So I went to live with my Aunt Nora, my father's sister. Nora is a good woman. She believes in justice, the kind you get from a hot meal and a fair wage. She does not, however, believe in the Federal Bureau of Investigation. She always said they were just men in suits who forgot who they worked for. I remember that afternoon. I did not cry, not at first. I just felt cold. I went into his study, the small room off the living room where he spent his nights. It smelled like paper and stale coffee. He had been working on a big case, something involving an Eastern European logistics chain. I found his private notebook shoved under a stack of files, not the official one he took to the office. It was filled with his neat, precise script. Arrows connected names I did not recognize to corporations I had never heard of. And in the margin of the last page, he had written. He had circled a set of initials in red ink, V.D. Underneath it, one last sentence, 4 words, "We are watched." That was the moment I became a journalist. It was not a choice. It was a continuation. It was my way of picking up the wire he had been forced to drop, to see if it was still hot. I learned his trade, but from the outside. I learned how to talk to chief financial officers and how to talk to truck drivers. I learned how to sit in a bar and listen to bartenders, and how to drink bad coffee with accountants who had seen something they should not have. Everyone has a piece of the truth. You just have to find what they are willing to trade for it. My phone buzzed on the table. A voice message from my best friend. Her voice was warm, worried. "Em, it is 2 a.m. Your location tracker says you were at a cemetery. Please tell me you are not digging up graves again." She meant it metaphorically. Mostly. All bones have fangs. Em, remember that. I smiled, a thin, tired expression in the dark. I texted her back. "I am wearing rubber boots." I turned my attention back to the papers from the envelope, the bank statements. I am good with numbers. My father taught me. These were not just transfers. They were a carefully constructed highway for dirty money, and I saw the name, listed as a transport partner, a customs clearance agent. North Shore Imports. I opened my laptop, my fingers flying across the keys. North Shore Imports, a legitimate company. On paper, registered in Delaware, of course. Offices in the Seaport District. But its board of directors was a ghost parade of shell corporations. Then, I typed his name, Luca Santori. The internet showed me the public man, smiling in a tuxedo at a hospital charity ball, shaking hands with a city councilor. His company, Santori Risk and Maritime Security, was featured in a Business Journal article, praised for its efficiency in global logistics management. The articles were all carefully worded, businessman with deep Italian roots, a family once linked to rumors. No criminal record, no charges. He was clean. He was a ghost in plain sight. I pulled out my own reporter's notebook, the spiral-bound one I buy in bulk. Well, I looked at the metal key, I looked at the photograph, I looked at the address on the business card. A devil does not show up to a grave 14 years after a man's death. A devil does not use the word debt and mean it. A devil does not leave flowers on the anniversary of a man's death, which I now knew he must have done. That anonymous single flower I found every single year. I wrote one sentence in my notebook. If he is a devil, why leave flowers on the anniversary? I closed the notebook. The rain had stopped, and the gray light of morning was pressing against my windows. I felt the exhaustion deep in my bones, but I felt something else, too, a cold, sharp clarity, the kind of clarity that comes after you have had the wind knocked out of you and you take your first painful breath. I knew that address. It was in the Seaport, right next to the offices of North Shore Imports. I got up, my joints cracking in protest. I went to the kitchen and made coffee. I made it strong, the way my father used to drink it, black, bitter, and hot enough to burn. I drank it standing, looking out the window at the harbor. The containers were already moving, being lifted and stacked like giant, colorful blocks, a river of money. I thought again, and my father had tried to build a dam. I went to my closet. I did not choose my usual jeans and sweater. I put on my best trousers, a silk blouse, and the blazer I save for important interviews. I put on the shoes with the sensible heels, the ones that say, I am not here to play. I was going to his address. I was going to use that key. My father had left me a map, and Luca Santori, for reasons of his own, had just handed me the compass. The fangs were bared. I was just going to make sure I bit first. The address on the card was Prime Seaport, a tower of smoked glass and brushed steel that screamed new money and old secrets. It was designed to reflect the harbor, to show you the water, but never let you see inside. I walked in at 9 o'clock sharp, the metal key from the cemetery feeling heavy and cold in my jacket pocket. The lobby smelled like fiercely strong Italian coffee, the kind that stains the cup, and expensive cleaning chemicals. A woman with hair pulled back so tight it looked painful sat behind a massive black marble desk. Her smile was a perfect painted-on red line. Her eyes, however, were not smiling. Her eyes said, "Do not try me." "Emma Hale for Luca Santori," I said, my voice sounding too loud in the echoing space. She did not check a list. She did not tap on a keyboard. She simply inclined her head. "He's expecting you." A silent man in a suit, who had been standing motionlessly by the elevators, moved. He did not speak. He just gestured with his chin. His presence was a wall of muscle and intention. I followed him. The elevator ride was silent, a smooth, fast ascent that made my stomach drop. We stopped at the top floor. The doors opened onto a space so quiet I could hear the air moving through the vents. The office was vast. The entire wall facing the harbor was glass. Floor to ceiling, the view was staggering. It was the view of a king. All those containers I had seen from my tiny loft window were right there, laid out below him, looking like children's blocks. Ships were moving slowly, gliding into their berths. It was a portrait of global commerce, and he had the best seat in the house. Luca Santori was not behind his desk. He stood by the window, hands clasped behind his back, wearing another perfect suit. This one was a dark, charcoal gray. He looked like he owned every ship he could see, every crane, every single container. He turned as I entered, his movements fluid and controlled. "Miss Hale," he said. His voice was the same as last night, that low, textured rumble. "Coffee." "No," I said. "I am not here for pleasantries. I am here for answers." He gestured to one of the 2 leather chairs facing his desk. The desk itself was a massive piece of dark, polished wood, empty except for a single thin file folder. I sat. The leather was soft and cold. He sat opposite me, the enormous view of the harbor framing him like a dark painting. He slid the file across the polished surface. It stopped perfectly, right in front of me. I opened it. It was not much, a single sheet of paper. It was a transcript, an official transcript of an anonymous call to the Boston Police Department placed 14 years ago. The call reported a single vehicle accident on the highway, the one my father had died on. I had read this page before. I had memorized the entire case file. I frowned. "I have seen this. This is from the police report." "Look at the time," he said. His voice was quiet. I looked. My blood, which had been running hot with adrenaline, turned to ice. In the official report, the one I had, the call came in at 7:45 in the evening. This transcript, marked as the original audio log, had the call coming in at 7:27. "This is wrong," I whispered. "No," Lucas said. "This one is correct. The one in your father's file is the forgery. The official record was altered. Your father's accident was reported, logged, and confirmed 18 minutes before the official police report says it even happened." 18 minutes. My mind reeled, calculating. 18 minutes is an eternity. Time for a car to be moved. Time for a scene to be staged. Time for someone to make sure the accident looked believable. Time for a man, maybe still alive, to be left to die. Who? The word was a dry rasp in my throat. "A man named Victor Dragon," he said. He spoke the name like it was something heavy, something he did not want in his clean office. He runs the Balkan network. He uses the Boston port as his personal hub. He does not move drugs. He moves things. He moves money. And he moves people, the kind who do not want to be moved. My father's notebook, the initials VD, circled in red, Victor Dragon. "My father," I started, my mind connecting the dots. He was an accountant for the Federal Bureau of Investigation. He was looking into an Eastern European logistics chain. He was looking into North Shore imports, and Luca finished for me, his eyes locked on mine. He found the seam. He found the place where Dragon's money was bleeding into the legitimate shipping world. Your father was very, very good at his job. Miss Hale, he was not just looking. He was about to cut Dragon's main artery, so Dragon cut his instead. A heavy silence settled in the room. All I could hear was the faint, distant horn of a container ship. "And you?" I finally asked, my voice gaining strength. "The picture. You and my father, drinking coffee. Where do you fit into this neat little story?" He did not look away, did not blink. 14 years ago, I was not the man I am today. I was part of my family's business, the old business. I wanted out, wanting out and getting out, he said. A faint, bitter twist to his mouth. Are two very different things. He leaned forward, his forearms resting on the perfect desk. Your father was investigating my family. He had enough to send me away for 20 years. He had me, as you would say, dead to rights. But he was a smart man. He saw things other men did not. He saw that I was not like them, that I wanted something different. I gave him information. He made a choice. He lost the key evidence against me. He let me walk away. In return, I gave him information on my rivals, the ones he really wanted. You were his informant, I said. The words tasted like ash. My father, the Straight Arrow Federal Bureau of Investigation agent. We were in exchange, he corrected, his voice sharp. He was a pragmatist. He gave me a chance to build this. He waved a hand at the view, at the clean, legal empire he had built on the bones of the old one. He saved my life. I owed him a debt. I have been paying it, in my own way, for 14 years, watching from a distance, the flower on his grave. Every year. That was me. But this, he tapped the file. This is the final payment. He leaned back. I pay my debts, Miss Hale, but I do not launder my sins. They are mine to keep. Your father's truth, however, belongs to you, and it is in that safe deposit box. The one he set up himself, I said, finishing the thought. Yes, the month before he died. He gave me the second key, the one I gave you last night. He told me, if something happens to me, wait until she is ready. She will find you when she stops looking for an accident and starts looking for a murder. I stood up. I could not sit still. I walked to the window, my back to him. The containers looked like toys from this high up. It is a great story, I said, my voice dripping with the sarcasm that had become my best defense. Very tidy. The reformed gangster and the martyred federal agent, it would make a great movie. I turned to face him. Why should I believe a single word you say? You had 10 men bow to you in a graveyard. You are not a businessman. Mr. Centauri, you are just a better dressed, better funded version of what you claim you left behind. He did not rise to the bait. He was perfectly, unnervingly still. You should not believe me, he said quietly. You should believe your father. But as for why you should trust that I am on your side in this, he paused. It is because I was the one who kept you alive last night. My heart skipped. What? He picked up a sleek black tablet from his desk and tapped the screen. He turned it to face me. It was a photograph, black and white, grainy. Clearly from a security camera. It was my car, parked on my street, time-stamped just before I left for the cemetery, and behind me, 2 car lengths back, was a dark sedan. No lights on, just a shadow, waiting. They were following you from your apartment, Lucas said, his voice flat. They followed you to Harbor View. They want what is in that box just as much as you do. They have been waiting 14 years for someone to open it. My men, he said, intercepted them at the gate while I was paying my respects. The police siren you heard, that was my man, calling in a disturbance to get them off your tail and get you out of there. A cold vibration started in my pocket, a chill that had nothing to do with the photo. I pulled out my phone, a new text, from the same anonymous number, from E. The message was 4 words, do not go, trap. I let out a short, harsh laugh. The sound was ugly in the quiet, expensive room. Something is funny, Luca asked, one dark eyebrow raising slightly. Wonderful, I said, holding up the screen so he could see it. Just wonderful. I have a guardian angel who texts in abbreviations. One of you is lying, Mr. Centauri. Maybe you both are. I put the phone back in my pocket. My mind was racing. A high-speed collision of fear and adrenaline. Courage? I thought, courage is not being unafraid. Courage is just signing a loan for fear at an inhuman interest rate. And the interest was due. All right, Mr. Centauri, I said, turning back to him. My decision made, I am going to that bank. I am going to open that box. It is not safe, he said, stating the obvious. I know, I snapped. That is why you are coming with me. And I am bringing my own witness. I pulled out my phone again and dialed the number for the newspaper's legal counsel. Maria, I said when she answered, I need you. Right now. Federal Trust Bank. Downtown. Bring your lawyer briefcase. I hung up before she could argue. I looked at Luca. If it is a trap, I want two things. I want a lawyer present, and I want a businessman who knows how to handle himself. You are my insurance, mister. Centauri, you are my bait." For the first time, he almost smiled. It was a terrifying expression, just a brief, dangerous lift at the corner of his mouth. "Very well, Miss Hale. Let us go to the bank." Federal Trust was one of those old Boston banks, marble floors, brass fittings, and a sense of quiet, oppressive wealth. Our lawyer, a sharp woman named Maria, looked deeply unhappy. She hated everything about this. "Emma, this is highly irregular," she whispered as we were led by a bank manager into the vault. "I know," I said, my voice steady. "That is why you are here, to witness." Luca was silent, but he was not calm. He was coiled. He moved with a predatory grace, his eyes scanning every corner, every person. The vault was in the basement, a massive circular steel door, thick walls, and the quiet hum of climate control. We were led to a wall of brushed silver boxes. The manager checked his ledger. "Box 347, Hale Daniel and Hale Emma." He inserted his key. I looked at the metal card in my hand, then I slid it into the second lock. It fit perfectly. Clicking into place with a smooth, oiled sound, I pulled. The box was heavy. We took it to a small, private viewing room. Just me, Luca, and Maria. The manager locked us in, for privacy. I lifted the lid. There was not much inside. It was not money. It was not gold. It was information. A small, black leather-bound notebook, just like the one I had found in his study. An old external hard drive, a 2.5-inch model, the kind that needed its own power cable, and a single silver USB stick, the kind that looks like a key. Etched into its side were 2 letters and 4 words, E-H, when you are ready. My father's words, my father's plan. I reached for the hard drive. My fingers were trembling. And then the alarm started. It was not a fire alarm. It was a piercing, deafening security alarm. Red lights began to flash in the small, windowless room. "What is happening?" Maria yelled, her hands flying to her ears. We heard shouting outside the room. A bank guard hammered on the door. "Ma'am, sir, you have to stay in the room. There is a security situation in the vault lobby." I looked at Luca. He had not moved. He had not even flinched at the alarm. He just tilted his head, listening to the sounds outside, the shouting, and something else. The sound of running feet, heavy, booted, rhythmic, more than one person. "It is a trap," I whispered, stating the obvious. Luca Centauri finally looked at me. His dark eyes were alive, electric and cold. "They are here," he said. It was not a warning, it was a confirmation. The bait had been taken. The alarm was a physical assault, a high-pitched scream that vibrated in my teeth. Outside the small viewing room, the polite sounds of banking had been replaced by chaos, shouts, the heavy, unmistakable thud of running boots. Luca Centauri did not raise his voice. He did not move toward the door. He moved toward me. "The box," he said, his voice cutting cleanly through the noise. "They are here for this," I said, my hand still resting on the cool metal of the hard drive. "They are here for what they think is in the box," he corrected. Before I could react, he slammed his hand onto a small, discreet panel under the lip of the viewing table. It was not a bank feature. It was his... A section of the wood-paneled wall beside us hissed and slid open, revealing a dark, narrow passage, a service corridor. "Go," he commanded. "Maria, you first." Our lawyer, Maria, was frozen, her face pale. "I'm not moving. I'm an officer of the court. This is a Federal Trust Bank." A muffled thump echoed from the vault lobby, like a heavy bag being dropped. Then another. The shouting stopped. It was replaced by a man barking orders in a language I did not recognize, Eastern European. Luca grabbed Maria by the arm, his grip unforgiving. "This is not a courtroom. Counselor, go now, or you will be a witness for the medical examiner." He practically threw her into the darkness. She stumbled, then ran. He looked at me. "Emma, the box." My mind was a flash of pure, cold calculation. They wanted the box. They expected the box. I looked at the contents, the notebook, the hard drive, the silver USB stick. In one fluid motion, I grabbed the external hard drive. It was the core. I knew it. It was the digital ledger. I shoved it deep into the waistband of my trousers, the cold metal biting into my skin, and pulled my blazer down to cover it. I grabbed the leather notebook and the silver stick, shoving them into my jacket pocket. Then I slammed the lid of the safe deposit box shut. It was now an empty, useless metal decoy. "Here," I said, thrusting the heavy box into his hands. His eyes met mine. He understood immediately. A flicker of something surprise, respect passed through his dark gaze. "Clever," he said. He shoved the box at a man who was suddenly there in the doorway of the passage, a man I had not seen before, dressed in the same dark suit as Luca's driver. "Take her," Luca ordered, nodding at me. "North Shore, now." The man grabbed my arm. "What about you?" I yelled at Luca over the alarm. "I am the bait," he said, echoing my own words back at me. He turned, not toward the escape route, but back toward the locked door of the viewing room, just as we heard the heavy, metallic clack of someone trying to override the lock from the outside. I did not have time to argue. The man pulled me into the darkness of the corridor. The panel hissed shut behind us, plunging us into near blackness, lit only by tiny, floor-level emergency lights. We ran. Maria was ahead of us, sobbing quietly as she stumbled along. The corridor twisted, and I smelled salt and damp concrete. It was an old maintenance tunnel, leading, I realized, toward the harbor. We burst out into a gray afternoon, hidden behind a ventilation unit in a deserted alley. A black sport utility vehicle was waiting, its engine humming. The man shoved Maria and me into the back seat and jumped in the front. "Go!" he snapped at the driver. The vehicle peeled out, tires screaming on the wet pavement, throwing me hard against the leather seat. I looked back. I did not see Luca. We drove for 30 minutes in absolute silence, broken only by Maria's attempts to catch her breath. We wove through the city, taking back roads, doubling back once, until I was completely disoriented. Finally, we hit the highway, heading north, away from Boston. We drove past the salt marshes and the old, beautiful houses of the North Shore. The driver did not speak until we turned onto a private, unmarked road, heading toward the water. The road ended at a house. It was not a mansion. It was a low, modern fortress of glass, dark gray stone, and concrete, built to look like it was part of the cliff face overlooking the Atlantic. The glass, I noted, was unnaturally thick, bulletproof. The same man who had pulled me from the bank led us inside. The interior was not a home. It was a command center. A massive, open-plan room was dominated by a wall of screens. Some showed security feeds, others showed maritime shipping lanes, complex data streams, and satellite maps. The air hummed with the sound of high-end computers. Luca Santori was already there. He stood in front of the main screen, a glass of water in his hand, looking perfectly calm. He had no visible injuries. He was not even wet from the rain. He must have left the bank through a different tunnel. He had been a step ahead the entire time. "Maria," he said, his voice calm, "my apologies for the theatricality. A car is waiting to take you home. You will bill my company for your time. You will, of course. Forget everything you saw. For your own safety." Maria Matnan, to her credit, drew herself up. "I will be reporting this to the Bar Association and the police." "Of course," Luca said, his voice dangerously smooth. "You do that." He knew, and she knew, that she would do no such thing. She was a lawyer, not a fool. She nodded stiffly and let another quiet man in a suit lead her away. Which left me, alone with him and his team. "They got the box," Luca stated. It was not a question. "Yes," I said. I reached under my blazer, my hand trembling now that the adrenaline was fading. I pulled out the hard drive. But they did not get the data. A new voice, dry as gravel, spoke from my left. "She is smarter than she looks." I turned. A man stood in the doorway of a smaller room. He was built like a brick wall with a face that looked like it had been carved from granite. His eyes were pale, cold, and missed nothing. He wore tactical trousers and a tight black shirt. Mason Reed, DeLuca said, by way of introduction. He runs my operations. He is a former ranger. Mason Reed just grunted. He did not look impressed. A woman with spiky, dyed blue hair and eyes that were wide, unblinking, and looked like she had not slept in 3 days, emerged from behind a bank of servers. "Is that it? Is that the drive?" she asked, her voice a high, fast staccato. "Let me see it. The encryption on his old files was a nightmare. This must be beautiful." "Ivy Park," Luca said. "She handles our data, open source intelligence." Ivy stared at the drive in my hand like it was a holy relic. From a hallway, a third person emerged. I was surprised. He was older, with kind eyes and a Roman collar. He was a priest. "And this," Luca said, his voice softening slightly, "is Father Miguel. He is our moral compass, and he runs a network of shelters for victims. He collaborates with us." "Kindness needs principles. Mr. Santori," the priest said, his voice gentle but firm. "And you, young woman," he said to me, "you look like you have seen a ghost." "Something like that," I whispered. "Ivy," Luca commanded. "See what is on it." I handed her the drive. She all but snatched it from me and disappeared into her nest of computers. "Now," Luca said, turning to me, "we wait." We did not wait long. Less than an hour, Ivy reappeared in the doorway. Her face was ashen. "Oh," she said, her voice small. "Oh, wow." "Report," Mason snapped. It is all here." Ivy stammered, tapping on a tablet. "It is a complete shadow ledger. Every shipment Victor Dragan has moved through Boston for the last 15 years. Every bribe, every payment, and a list." She took a shaky breath. "A list called sponsors. And there is video." She projected an image onto the main screen. It was grainy, dark footage from a warehouse, men and women looking terrified, being herded from a refrigerated container. "He is moving people," Father Miguel whispered, his face hardening, his kindness evaporating, replaced by a cold fury. "He's trafficking human souls." "Who are the sponsors?" I demanded, my reporter's notebook suddenly in my hand. "It is bad," Ivy said. "A state senator, 2 Boston Police Department chiefs. The names are all here, coded, but the drive has the key." This was it. This was the story. This was everything. My father had found it all. "He found it," I said, my voice thick. "My God, he had it all." "And Dragan knew it," Luca said, "which is why he staged an accident 18 minutes after the man was already dead." My phone rang. The loud, cheerful ringtone I had assigned to my Aunt Nora blasted through the high-tech silence of the room. It was jarring. Wrong. I looked at Luca, then answered, "Aunt Nora." "Emma, thank God." Her voice was frantic, breathless with panic. "Emma, they were here, 2 men. They tried to get in the house. They had guns. I hid in the pantry and called 911. They ran when they heard the sirens. Emma, what is going on?" My blood turned to water. Dragan, he had not just gone for me. He had gone for my family. "Are you okay?" "I am fine. I am fine," she rattled off. "But Emma, your apartment, they mentioned your roommate." A cold dread, worse than anything I had felt in the bank, seized me. I hung up on my aunt. I dialed my roommate, Kara. She was a barista, a kind, gentle soul who painted watercolors and fed stray cats. She was the most innocent person I knew. It went straight to voicemail. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. It was a picture. Kara, she was in a dark space, a steel room. She was crying. Her hands were bound. Underneath the picture, 6 words. "You have what is mine. Now I have what is yours. Trade." I dropped the phone. It clattered on the concrete floor. My legs gave out. I would have fallen if Mason had not grabbed my arm, his grip like a steel vice. "I cannot breathe," I whispered. "He has her. He has Kara." I looked at Luca, my vision blurring with tears of pure, undiluted rage. "He has her." Luca's face was a mask of cold fury. He picked up my phone. He read the message. He looked at Mason. Find her, he said. We will, Mason said, his voice a low growl. Ivy, the phone that sent this. Trace it now. I am on it, Wanawang, she said, already flying back to her station. We have to give it to him, I said, my voice shaking. We have to trade. He can have the drive. I do not care. No, Luca said, his voice absolute. We do not negotiate with men like Victor Dragan. We do not trade. We take... that is my friend, I screamed at him, finding my voice. That is a person, not an asset. I will not let her die for a hard drive. And I will not let you die for being reckless, he shot back, his voice rising for the first time. This is the war your father started. Emma, I am trying to keep you from being its next casualty. You wanted the truth. This is the truth. It is ugly, and it has a body count. I am not one of your soldiers. Santori, I spat, pushing myself away from Mason. I am not an asset to be protected in your fortress. I am a journalist, and that man has my friend. Then we will get her back, he said, his voice low and intense, stepping toward me. We will find her. We will retrieve her. And then, his eyes burned into mine. You will publish your story. We will get your person back, Emma, and we will burn his entire world to the ground. That is my promise. I stared at him, my heart hammering. I thought I was dating a hurricane named Santori, but I was the one choosing to stand in the rain. I hated him for his coldness, and I hated myself for believing him. How? I whispered. How do you find her? Ivy, Mason called out. Talk to me. The photo, Ivy said, her voice tight. The metadata is stripped, but the picture, the wall behind her, it is corrugated steel. The lighting is low. I see condensation. It looks like a refrigerated container. A refrigerated container. Like the ones in the video. Like the ones at the port. He has her at the harbor. I said, he's hiding her in plain sight. He is moving her, Luca corrected. He will not keep her in one place. We have to find which container now. I am running a trace on the phone, Ivy said. It is a burner, but it just pinged a tower. Near the port. Warehouse C14. He just turned it off. Warehouse C14, Mason said, already pulling a map up on the main screen. He zoomed in on a section of the port. That is North Shore Imports territory, Dragan's home turf. We are going, I said. You are staying here, Mason grunted. No, I said, my voice flat and dead. He took her because of me. I am going. She will be a liability, Mason said to Luca, completely ignoring me. No, I will not, I said, walking up to the screen. I am the one who brings the light. That is what I do, and he is expecting a trade. We are not trading, Luca said. I know, I said. He's expecting me to be a crying, hysterical victim. He's not expecting me to be a journalist. I wear a vest, and I wear a camera. I will be your excuse. I will be the one making the trade, and you. I looked at Mason. Will do what you do. Mason stared at me for a long, hard second. He looked at Luca. Luca nodded, just once. Give her a vest, he said. Mason looked like he wanted to argue, but he just turned to a locker. He threw a heavy tactical vest at my feet. Put this on, he growled. He pulled out a small camera, the kind that clips to a chest rig. You wanted to record everything, reporter fine, record it all, but you live to publish it. You get in my way. I will leave you behind. Understood. Understood, I said, my hands shaking as I tried to fasten the heavy buckles. I did not want the truth to come out this way. I did not want it to be funded by violence. But sometimes, a lockbox only opens with an explosion. We geared up. We moved to the garage. 3 black sport utility vehicles, identical to the ones from the cemetery. Just before we left, Ivy ran out. A message, she said, holding out a phone. It came to a burner phone in your car. Luca, the one you left at the bank. It was just remotely activated. She played the message. A voice, thick with an Eastern European accent, filled the garage. It was smug, cold, and utterly inhuman. Your father almost ruined my best season. Miss Hale, It seems children inherit their parents' bad habits. Bring me my property, or she will pay for his." The message ended. Ivy looked pale. "I found something else," she whispered, looking at Luca. "Our movements, the bank, the safe house. Someone is feeding them our schedule. There is an insider, someone on our team." Luca Santori's face did not change, but his eyes went dead. They became flat, black ice. "Good," he said, his voice a razor's edge. "Light a fire. The rats will run." He got into the car. "Let's go." As we drove, I pulled out my own phone. I dialed a number in New York, a number I knew by heart. "Rena Caldwell," a sharp, no-nonsense voice answered. "Rena, it is Emma," I said, my voice low. "Hale, I was wondering when you would call me with something too big for Boston. What do you have?" "The story of a lifetime. Rena," I said, watching the city lights flash by. "The kind that gets people killed, the kind my father died for." "I am listening." "I am sending you an encrypted file," I said, looking at Ivy, who nodded, already working. "It has everything, ledgers, video, names, including a state senator and 2 police chiefs. I need you to set up a multi-point distribution, a dead man switch, United States, United Kingdom, Germany. If I do not check in with you in 12 hours, you publish it all. Verify it internally. You have 10 days, but the switch is set for 12 hours. There was a pause. "Emma, what are you into?" "I am digging up a grave, Rena," I said, "and this time, the fangs are out. Just be ready to hit publish." I hung up. I looked at the vest on my chest. I looked at the dark, armed, silent men around me. I was a reporter. I was about to walk into a war zone, led by a man who was equal parts my savior and my nightmare. And I was bringing a camera. We returned to the safe house, but it was not a refuge. It was a command center, a broadcast station, and an armory. The air was electric, the tension so thick I could barely breathe. We were not just planning a rescue, we were planning a war. The plan was a 2-pronged assault. My prong was information. I sat with Ivy, her fingers flying across 3 keyboards. We were assembling what I called the bullet cluster. I took the hard drive's contents, the raw data, and I did what I do. I turned it into a story. I wrote a clean, concise summary, the who, what, when, where, and why. I attached the sponsors list, the complete ledger, and the horrifying videos from the refrigerated containers. I packaged it. 3 encrypted files, identical. One for Rena Caldwell in New York, one for a trusted contact at a paper in London, one for a source in Berlin. The dead man's switch was active. If I did not check in, the files would unlock in 12 hours. Luca's prong was physical. He stood with Mason in front of the massive wall of screens, which now showed tactical layouts of the port. They were splitting their forces. Team Alpha, led by Mason, would assault Warehouse C-14, the primary target. He would get Kara. Team Bravo would hit the offices of North Shore Imports to seize their servers and cut off the financial head. Team Charlie, led by Luca himself, would strike Dragon's known safe house in Revere. It was precise. It was brutal. It was a military operation. We were 10 minutes from deployment. The garage 3 floors below was already humming with the sound of idling engines. I was fastening the heavy tactical vest Mason had thrown at me. The small body camera was clipped to the front, a hard, objective eye pointing at the world. Ivy suddenly let out a sharp, choked noise. It was not a word, just a gasp of pure horror. "Luca!" He stopped, halfway through pulling on a pair of black gloves. "Talk to me, Ivy." "I am in," she said, her voice a strained whisper. "I broke his encrypted channel. I piggybacked the trace from the burner phone that sent the threat." And Mason said, his voice impatient. "It is a standing order," Ivy said, her face pale, her wide eyes fixed on her screen. "A contingency, coded family purge." I felt the blood drain from my face. "He has teams," Ivy said, her voice shaking. "Active. Right now, they are watching 12 families, our families, Luca, families of your core staff." She looked at Mason, her expression shattering. Mason, your ex-wife and son, they are outside their house. She looked at another man across the room. Elias, Luca's cousin, who was checking his weapon. Elias, your daughter. Elias went white. His hands, which had been so steady, began to tremble. The order, Ivy continued, her voice cracking, is on a timer. It is automated. If Dragan sends a stand-down code, the teams withdraw. If he is captured or if he fails to check in, if he goes dark for more than 40 minutes, the order executes. He will kill them. Luca, all 12 families, simultaneously. The room went dead. The only sound was the hum of the servers. 40 minutes. Dragan had built the perfect defense. He had turned Luca's own men into his hostages. We pull back, Mason said, his voice a low growl of pure anguish. We stand down. We reevaluate. No, Luca said, his voice flat. We pull back. He moves Kara. We lose her. We lose the trail. Oh, we attack, Mason shot back, seen slamming his fist on the table. And my son dies. His daughter dies. We cannot move. We are checkmated. They were trapped. Dragan had neutralized them. I looked at the console in front of Ivy. I looked at the files I had just sent, set to deploy in 12 hours. Dragan's bomb was set for 40 minutes. My father's words echoed in my head. We are watched. My words to Rena. I am digging up a grave. I knew what I had to do. You are right, I said. My voice was calm. It cut through the terrified silence. You cannot attack him, and you cannot pull back. He has trapped you. Emma, this is not your decision, Mason snapped, his face gray with impossible stress. He has neutralized your violence, I said, walking toward the main console. His leverage is secrecy. His leverage is the darkness. You have to take it away from him. What are you talking about? Luca asked. His dark eyes were locked on mine, searching. His power, I said, only works as long as he is a ghost. He only has power as long as his sponsors are safe. The senator, the police chiefs, they are his real insurance. If they go down, right now, in public, his purge teams will not follow orders. They will not execute 12 families for a man who is already lost. They are mercenaries, not zealots. They will run. Luca understood instantly. Publish, he whispered. Publish now, I said, my voice hard. Not in 12 hours, not after legal verification. We detonate it. We force the hand of every federal agency in this city. We make him the most wanted man in America, effective 2 minutes from now. It is reckless, Mason argued, though his voice was weaker. It could compromise evidence. It could get witnesses killed. It is more reckless to let 12 families be slaughtered, I shot back. We are not law enforcement, SI. We are out of time. We have to make the loudest noise possible. I did not wait for his approval. I pulled out my phone. I dialed Rena Caldwell. My hands were perfectly steady. Hail, she answered, her voice sharp. This better be important. Rena, it is me. Do not ask questions. The dead man's switch, the cold ledger files. I need you to pull the trigger. Right now. Not in 12 hours. Now. There was a half second of dead. Stunned silence. Emma. Legal will have my head. We have not verified a single source. I could be sued. I could go to jail. Rena, I said, and my voice finally broke. Just a little. There are 12 families, including children, with guns to their heads. If you do not publish, they will be executed in less than 40 minutes. Please, wake up the world. Rena, do it for my father. Do it now. The line was quiet. I could hear her breathing. God help us all, she said. It is going. The cascade is starting. I hung up. I turned to Ivy. Save a cryptographic hash of the original files. Document the chain of custody. Everything. We are lighting the fire, but we are doing it by the book. I turned to Luca. The decision was made. Your move. A slow, cold smile spread across his face. It was a terrifying sight. He just lost his insurance, he said. He just does not know it yet. Mason, the plan is scrubbed. We are not splitting the teams. Sir. He's not at his safe house. He's not at his office. He's at the port. He's overseeing a shipment. He's waiting for me to bring Emma Hale to make the trade for his hard drive. Luca's eyes found mine. He's at warehouse C14 with Kara and with Dragan. All of us, Mason said, a new, cold hope in his voice. All of us, Luca confirmed. We get the girl. We get the monster. Let's go. The convoy moved as one. 3 black sport utility vehicles, a silent arrow in the night, flying toward the port. We drove through the city, past the quiet houses, past the late-night diners. Nobody knew the war that was about to start. We stopped a block from the warehouse. It was too quiet. Mason, in the lead vehicle with me and Luca, held up a hand. No guards. I see no perimeter. He pulled them in. It is a trap. Of course it is, Luca said. He turned to me. He's expecting a trade. He's expecting me. And he is expecting you. Just us, I said, my heart hammering against the hard plate of the vest. We walk in. We got out. The air was cold, thick with the smell of diesel, salt, and the faint, sick, sweet smell of rotting fish. We walked, side by side, toward the massive, dark warehouse. We entered through a small side door. It was a canyon of steel containers, stacked 5 high. It was silent. In the very center of the vast space, a single, harsh overhead light illuminated a small patch of concrete. Victor Dragan stood in the light. He was smaller than I had imagined, impeccably dressed in a suit that probably cost more than my apartment. He was smiling. Tied to a steel chair beside him was Kara. Her eyes were wide with terror. A piece of tape was over her mouth. She was alive. "The journalist!" Dragan called out, his voice echoing in the huge space. His accent was thick. "And the prodigal son, Mr. Suntory. A pleasure. Did you bring me my property?" "Let her go. Victor," Luca said, his voice flat and calm. He stopped about 30 feet away. I stopped with him. "Ah, no. This is not a negotiation," Dragan chuckled. "This is a transaction. You give me the hard drive. I let you go. She." He gestured to Kara. "She stays? As insurance. You see, I have men visiting some old friends of yours, Luca. I believe you are fond of your cousin Elias's daughter." My phone, in my pocket, vibrated once. A text from Ivy, who was back in the command vehicle. "It is live. Check cable news network." He was monologuing. He was savoring his victory. He did not know. I stepped forward. "No." Dragan frowned. The smile wavered. "What did you say, little girl?" I said no. I said, my voice louder, clearer, it echoed. I looked at Kara. "It is going to be okay, Kara." Then I looked back at Dragan. "You are not the bridge. You are not the king. You are just a story. And you are about to be yesterday's news." His face, which had been so smug, twisted. "What?" As if on cue, his own phone, in his suit pocket, began to buzz, and again, a furious, frantic vibration, a torrent of messages. He pulled it out, his hand shaking slightly. He stared at the screen. I saw his face change. The color drained from it. He was looking at a live news feed, his own face, the video of the container, the name of the state senator. "You!" he whispered, his voice shaking with a rage so profound it was almost silent. He looked up, his eyes pure, murderous hatred. You burned me. You burned everything." He spat the words at me. "You are burning bridges. Journalist." "I am the fire," I said. My camera was recording it all. He screamed. It was not a word. It was a raw, animal sound of pure fury. He ripped his gun from under his jacket. Kill them all now." The warehouse exploded. Lights snapped on overhead, revealing gunmen on top of the containers. We were in a kill box. But Luca's men were already in motion. Mason and his team, 6 of them, flowed in from the shadows, returning fire. Their weapons suppressed but precise. The air filled with the shriek of ricocheting bullets. Luca grabbed me, throwing me bodily behind a massive forklift. "Stay down," he roared. The world became a nightmare of noise and light. I saw Mason moving like a machine, providing cover fire, heading for Kara. He grunted, a sharp cry of pain, as a bullet hit his leg. He went down, but he did not stop. He dragged himself behind a container, still firing. "Elias," Luca yelled, firing 2 precise shots at a gunman above us. "Cover Mason! Get the girl now!" Elias, Luca's cousin, broke from cover. He ran forward. He reached Kara. He slashed the ropes on her chair. He grabbed her, pulling her back toward our position. From the side, 2 of Dragon's men appeared, blocking their path. "Luca!" I screamed. Luca stepped out from behind the forklift, raising his weapon to give Elias cover. Elias shoved Kara hard, sending her stumbling toward us. "Run!" he yelled to her. She ran, half crawling, half falling, toward me. I grabbed her, pulling her behind the steel. Elias turned. He raised his own gun. My brain processed the impossible. He was not aiming at Dragon's men. He was aiming it straight at Luca Centauri's back. The traitor, the rat. I saw it. The camera on my chest saw it. The entire horrific, slow-motion betrayal. "No!" I screamed. I did not think. I moved. I am not a soldier. I am a reporter. But I launched myself from behind the forklift, my shoulder crashing with all my weight into the middle of Luca's back. "Stay down," Mason roared from somewhere on the floor. I hit Luca, knocking him forward, off balance, to the ground. A gunshot, deafeningly close, exploded next to my ear. And then, pain. A white-hot, searing, unbelievable pain. It felt like a hot poker had been driven straight through my left shoulder. The impact spun me around. I fell hard on the concrete. The wind knocked out of me. My camera, still attached to my vest, was recording. It was pointed right at Elias. He was frozen. His gun was still raised. Smoking. He looked at me, lying bleeding on the ground. He looked at Luca, who was already turning, his own gun coming up. He looked at his own weapon, as if he did not understand how it got there. They have my daughter," he whispered, a strangled sob. "They have my little girl." Another shot rang out, not from Luca, from one of Dragon's men, high on the containers. Elias fell, clutching his chest, executed by the very men he had tried to serve. And then a new sound, a sound louder than the gunfire, louder than the screaming. Sirens. Not 1 or 2. It was a wall of sound, dozens of them coming from all directions. The massive warehouse bay doors burst open, flooding the dark space with blinding, flashing red and blue lights. "Federal Bureau of Investigation, drop your weapons hands in the air now." The warehouse swarmed with federal agents, Homeland Security investigations teams, and local police, all in full tactical gear. Dragon's remaining men froze. They dropped their rifles. The family purge teams, scattered across the city, seeing the news, seeing the federal response, were already gone. Their loyalty was to a paycheck, not to a dead man walking. Dragon's leverage had vanished in a blaze of breaking news. Victor Dragon stood alone. He looked at the swarm of federal agents. He looked at his dead men. He looked at Elias, bleeding out on the concrete. He looked at me. He let out a long string of curses in Serbian. Then, as the agents tackled him, driving him to the ground, he went utterly, completely silent. He knew. It was over. The noise began to fade. The world was narrowing to the single, pulsing point of agony in my shoulder. "My first time on national television," I choked out, a strangled laugh bubbling in my chest. "And it is because of a bullet hole. Just great." Luca was at my side in an instant. His hands were on my shoulder, applying pressure. His face was a mask of something I had never seen before. Not coldness, not anger. It was raw, naked fear. "You are all right, Emma," he said, his voice rough. "Stay with me. You are all right. You are safe." He was holding me, his expensive suit jacket already dark and ruined with my blood. When the tactical team surrounded us, "You!" the lead agent yelled, his rifle aimed squarely at Luca's head. "Hands, show me your hands now! Drop your weapon!" Luca's weapon was already on the ground. He looked at the agent. He looked at me, bleeding in his arms. He looked at the small, red, blinking light of the camera on my chest. still recording. He had a choice. He was Luca Santori, a man of power, a man who did not bow, who did not surrender. Slowly, deliberately, to protect the evidence, to protect my story, to make it all clean. Luca Santori let go of my shoulder and raised both his hands high in the air. He chose the law. He chose my truth. I saw him, framed in the flashing lights, giving himself up for me. Then the pain finally won, and the world went black. I woke up to the smell of antiseptic and the steady, rhythmic pulse of a heart monitor. My world had shrunk to the white, perforated acoustic tiles of a ceiling at Massachusetts General Hospital. My left shoulder was a universe of dull, throbbing fire, a heavy, deep ache that was tightly bound. I was alive. That was the first fact. The second was that I was going to need a lot of physical therapy. A surgeon, a kind woman with tired eyes, explained it to me. The bullet had gone clean through. It missed the bone, mostly, but it had torn through the muscle and nerves. "You were lucky," she said, her voice gentle. "A few inches to the right, and you would never have used your arm again. A few inches to the left, and you would have bled out on that warehouse floor. Lucky, I would have a scar, a puckered, ugly map of that night, a permanent reminder that I had been stupid enough to launch myself in front of a gun. I knew, with the certainty of a lifelong Bostonian, that it would ache every time a nor'easter blew in, a personal barometer for the rain. I was not the only one being debriefed. A federal agent, a severe woman in a practical suit, was waiting for me as soon as the morphine haze cleared. "The camera, Miss Hale," she said, getting straight to the point. "It was recording," I whispered, my throat raw. "We have it," she said. A small flicker of professionalism broke, and her eyes held something like awe. "The footage is conclusive. It is the single most important piece of evidence recovered." My camera, the small, objective eye I had clipped to my vest, it had seen everything. It had recorded Elias's betrayal, his hand steady as he aimed at Luca's back. It had captured my idiotic, reckless tackle. It had captured the gunshot, the flash of pain. It had recorded Elias's strangled, desperate confession. "They have my daughter." And it had recorded Luca, his hands raised in the air, surrendering to the federal tactical team, a silent, pragmatic choice to protect the chain of custody, to protect me. My story, the one I had leaked to Rena, was no longer a leak. It was a flood. The breaking news had not just been a 40-minute distraction. It had been the first shot in a war. The public pressure, immediate and overwhelming, forced the Department of Justice's hand. They descended on Boston with the full, terrifying force of a racketeer, influenced and corrupt Organizations Act investigation. My father's cold ledger was not just a file, it was their roadmap. The sponsors were the first to fall. The two Boston Police Department chiefs, whose names had been on that list, were suspended within 24 hours. Their badges and guns were confiscated. They were indicted a week later. The state senator, the one who smiled at charity balls, tried to hold a press conference. He called it a smear campaign by a reckless journalist. But my video, the hard proof, was already playing on a loop on every cable news network by noon that day, facing federal indictment and a state recall petition. He resigned, he was arrested, later prosecuted for receiving illegal campaign financing, conspiracy, and aiding a human trafficking organization. The dominoes fell, one by one, all across the city. The entire corrupt structure my father had died to expose was crumbling, brought down by his old files and my new camera. The immediate casualties were counted. Mason Reed, the gravel-voiced ranger, had survived. The bullet had shattered his femur, but he was alive. I heard from Ivy that he was already barking orders at the nurses, complaining that the hospital food was worse than his old rations. He would walk again, with a limp, but he would walk. Elias, Luca's cousin, the traitor, had also survived. The bullet from Dragan's man had missed his heart. He was under federal guard in the same hospital. His confession, given from his hospital bed, was the final nail in Dragan's coffin. He told them everything. He detailed the coercion, the way Dragon held their families hostage, how he had been forced to betray his own blood to save his daughter. He would testify, and in exchange, his daughter would be placed in federal protection. And then there was Kara, my sweet, gentle roommate. She was physically unharmed. Mason's team, in the middle of the firefight, had managed to secure her and the other 6 women in that refrigerated container, but she was not okay. I visited her a week after I was discharged. She was staying in a small, quiet apartment, paid for by an anonymous benefactor. The light in her eyes was gone. She jumped at every sound. She could not, she said, ever go back to our loft. Too many memories. Father Miguel, a man who was proving to be a true saint, stepped in. He had taken her under his wing, connecting her to a private, long-term trauma therapy center, a safe house. He called it a place where she could heal without fear. It was a slow, painful process. Justice had saved her, but the cost was her peace of mind. And finally, there was Luca. He was not hailed as a hero. He was not given a medal. The moment he had raised his hands, he had been put in handcuffs. The federal agents did not see him as the man who had helped stop Dragan. They saw him as Dragan's chief rival. He was arrested, held without bail. The charges were not for the shootout at the warehouse. My video and Elias's testimony had cleared him of that. The charges were for his past, for the behaviors outside the unit he had told me about, for the financial crimes, the conspiracy, the racketeering that my own father had been investigating 14 years ago. He was in a federal holding cell for 3 weeks. I was not permitted to see him. His lawyers, the most expensive and aggressive in the city, were locked in a battle with the Department of Justice. In the end, a deal was made. It was a cold, pragmatic piece of legal artwork. Luca Santori would plead guilty to 2 counts of financial conspiracy and 1 count of racketeering, all charges dating back over a decade. He would agree to cooperate fully with the ongoing investigation into the other old Boston families, and he would forfeit a significant portion of his assets. I heard the number was over 60% of his company's value. He was effectively giving up his crown. In exchange, the federal government, citing his extraordinary and voluntary cooperation in the Victor Dragan case and his role in safeguarding the cold ledger evidence, would recommend a suspended sentence. He was released on 5 years of strict federal probation and supervision. He was no longer the king of the harbor, but he was a free man. My life changed, too. The Cold Ledger series, as Rena had branded it, was the biggest story of the year. I was no longer a freelance reporter scraping by. Rena had offered me a staff position at the New York paper before I could even properly bend my left arm. The story was shortlisted for the Pulitzer Prize. When I attended the awards dinner in New York, I wore a dark blue pantsuit. The cut was sharp, designed to hide the fact that my left shoulder was still stiff, that my arm did not move as fluidly as it once had. I did not win the Pulitzer. It went to a team covering a famine in Africa, but I did win a different journalism award, one for investigative reporting. When I walked up to the podium, my steps were steady. I looked out at the sea of faces in that glittering ballroom. "Thank you," I said, my voice clear and strong. "I am here because a man I never truly knew, my father, Daniel Hale, believed that numbers told a story. He died for that story. I am honored to finally tell it for him." I thanked Rena Caldwell, who had the courage to hit publish. I thanked Ivy Park and Mason Reed for their skill and their sacrifice. I thanked Father Miguel for reminding me that kindness must have discipline. I took a breath, and I must also thank Luca Santori. I said, the room went utterly silent. I did not romanticize him. I did not call him a savior. I just told the truth. "Mr. Santori's past is a matter of public record," I said, my voice unwavering. "But so is his present. He chose to honor a debt, at great personal cost. He chose to stand in the light, knowing full well it would burn him. Justice is not always clean. It is often bloody, but it is always necessary. This award is for the truth." The noise of the world eventually faded. The trials began. The city began to stitch itself back together. I went back to Aunt Nora's. The first thing that hit me when I opened the door was the smell of cinnamon and baked apples. It was the smell of safety, of childhood. She was in her kitchen, pulling a pie from the oven. "You are too thin," she grumbled, not looking at me. "You look like a ghost." "I feel like one," I said, sitting at the old wooden table. She put the pie on the counter and wiped her flour-covered hands on her apron. She looked at me. Really looked at me, her gaze taking in my changed shoulder, the new lines around my eyes. "I told you not to go digging up graves, Emma," she said, her voice rough. "I know, Aunt Nora." She nodded, a short, sharp motion. "I was wrong." She cut a huge slice of the pie and slid the plate in front of me. It was steaming. "You dug up that grave so you could finally bury the right people." She poured me a glass of milk. "Eat." It was her way of saying, "I love you. Welcome home." Months passed. The chill of autumn gave way to the deep cold of winter, and then the tentative thaw of spring. My shoulder healed. It would never be perfect, but it was strong. One morning, when the sky was a clear, brilliant blue that only happens in New England after a storm, I went back to Harborview Cemetery. He was already there. Luca Santori stood in front of my father's grave. He was not the man I had first seen in this spot. The immaculate overcoat was gone. The aura of untouchable power had been replaced by something quieter. He wore a simple, dark wool sweater and trousers. He was not wearing a tie. He looked thinner, but he stood straighter. He was holding a small bunch of blue flowers, hyacinths, my father's favorite. He knelt, his knee pressing into the damp earth, and placed the flowers at the base of the headstone. He stayed there, kneeling, for a long time, just reading the name, Daniel Hale. He spoke, his voice quiet, not meant for me, though he must have known I was there. He spoke to the stone. "Debt paid," he said. His voice was thick. He cleared his throat and stood up, brushing the dirt from his knee. He looked at the grave again. Debt honored. I walked up then, stopping a few feet away. We stood side by side, not touching, just sharing the same cool, clean air. He turned his head to look at me. His dark eyes were clear. The shadows were still there, deep in their corners, but they were not in control. He was a man who had been through a fire and had come out the other side, scorched but whole. I did not say anything. I did not. This was not a moment for words. I was not there to romanticize the violence that had brought us to this place. I was not there to pretend the blood had washed away cleanly. It had not. I was not looking at a fallen prince or a reformed monster. I was just looking at a man who had learned, the hardest way possible, how to stand up straight in front of a headstone and finally, after 14 long years, do the right thing. Justice does not make anyone whole again. It just draws a line. It acknowledges the loss, and it gives you a chance to build something new on the scarred earth. We were not whole, not him, not me, but we were alive, and for the first time, we were free. I did not return to my loft in the South End. I could not. The memory of Kara's terror, the metallic scent of fear, had soaked into the exposed brick. It was no longer my home. I found a smaller apartment, a clean, quiet space overlooking the harbor. From my new window, I could still see the containers, that endless river of steel, but they looked different now. They were just boxes. The current of dark money had been dammed, the flow diverted, by my father's old ledgers and my new scars. I took the job with Rena Caldwell in New York. I was a staff investigative reporter, but I worked remotely from my new apartment. My beat was corruption, that messy, tangled place where private money and public trust bleed into each other. I was good at it. With the money I earned from the book deal and the journalism awards, I started a foundation. I asked Father Miguel to run it. He agreed, on one condition. We named it the Harbor Light Fund. It was a dedicated, secure resource for the victims of trafficking, a place for people like Kara to find shelter, therapy, and a way back to themselves. It was a place to turn the light back on. Luca Santori did not disappear. He stayed. He sold his glass tower in the seaport. His federal probation was a heavy, constant presence. He built a new company, a much smaller one, from the ashes of his forfeited empire, Santori Maritime Solutions. He was under constant federal supervision. He specialized in secure logistics, not for the highest bidder, but for the most vulnerable. He created safe, transparent shipping corridors for medical supplies going to war zones and food aid bound for famine-stricken coasts. It was not glamorous. It was not wildly profitable. It was hard, grinding work. It was, I knew, his form of penance. A ring, I had learned, is just metal. A promise is a habit. He was building a new habit, every single day. We met at the cemetery often. It was not a place of sadness anymore. It was our quiet center, a place of accounting. I met him there one afternoon in late summer, almost exactly 1 year after the night in the warehouse. The air was warm, smelling of the ocean and freshly cut grass. He was already there, standing by the headstone. I stood beside him, and for a long time, we just watched the clouds move over the city. He turned to me. His dark eyes were clear. The shadows were gone. He looked like a man who had finally finished a long, exhausting journey. "Emma," he said, his voice quiet. He did not touch me. Instead, he knelt slowly, his knee pressing into the soft earth. It was not the dramatic gesture of a prince in a story. It was the deliberate, humble movement of a man surrendering his defenses. "I'm not here to ask for forgiveness anymore. Emma," he said, looking up at me, his gaze steady and strong. "The debt I owed your father has been honored. This is not about the past. This is not penance." He took a breath. "I'm here for permission to stay." He reached into the pocket of his jacket. He pulled out a small, dark velvet box. He opened it. Inside was not a massive, glittering diamond. It was a simple, thin platinum band, elegant and strong. "I saw the absolute worst of you, Emma Hale," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "And you saw the absolute worst of me. And we both chose to stand our ground. I do not want a fairy tale. I am not a prince. I want what is real. I want this. I want to stay." I looked at the simple ring. I looked at his face. He was not begging. He was not promising a perfect life. He was committing. I thought about the blood on the warehouse floor. I thought about the terror in the bank vault, and I thought about him, standing in those flashing red and blue lights, his hands raised high in the air, choosing my truth over his own freedom. I held out my left hand. "Yes," I said. It was not a fairy tale. It was a choice. It was the choice you make when you have seen the monster in someone, and they have seen the monster in you, and you both decide to stand guard together. He slid the ring onto my finger. It was cool, solid, and it fit perfectly. As we were walking out of the cemetery, my hand in his, my phone buzzed. It was a text message from a number I did not recognize, but the signature was one I would never forget, a single letter, E. Good choice, and he would have liked that ring. Check your mail. I stopped on the gravel path. Luca turned, his expression questioning. "What is it?" "Elias," I said, my mind racing, "is in the Federal Witness Protection Program. He has no way to contact me." "It was not Elias," Luca said simply. When I returned to my apartment, a plain manila envelope was on my doorstep. There was no return address. Inside, there was no long letter of explanation, just a sticky note with a name and a phone number. "Evelyn Hart, call me." I knew the name. My blood ran cold. Evelyn Hart? She had been my father's partner at the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the one who had taken an abrupt retirement just weeks after his funeral. I had tried to find her for years. I dialed the number. A woman answered on the first ring. Her voice was crisp, older and sharp as glass. "Miss Hale, I was beginning to wonder when you would call." "It was you," I whispered, sinking into the chair at my desk. "All of it. The text at the cemetery, the warning at the bank. Do not go. Trap. You were E." "E for Evelyn," she said. There was a rustling sound on the line, like old paper. Elias was a good guess, but he was a victim. I was a participant. "Daniel. Your father. He was my partner. He was my best friend. His off-book investigation was supposed to be a secret, but I knew. I always knew he was in too deep. "You knew," I accused, my voice turning hard. "You let him die." "I could not stop it," she said, and for the first time her voice cracked, losing its steel. "I was too late to save him. I have lived with that for 14 years. But I was not too late to save you. When Daniel died, I made a promise. Not to him, but to myself. I would watch his daughter, from a distance. I retired, went dark, and I watched. I sent you that first text because I knew Centauri was finally paying his respects on the anniversary. I knew he was ready. I sent the warning at the bank because I knew Dragon's men were in place. I was just balancing the scales, making sure Daniel's daughter did not die for his truth. "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked. "Because it is finished," she said. "The debt is paid, all of them. There is one last file. It was in Daniel's desk. I took it the day he died, before the federal agents sealed his office. It does not belong to me. It belongs to you. Check your email." I hung up and turned to my laptop. A new email was waiting. One attachment. I clicked it open. It was a scan, a single page of a letter, handwritten in my father's precise, careful script. It was dated 14 years ago, just 3 days before his death. It was not addressed to me. It was addressed to Luca. "Luca," it read. "If you are reading this, the worst has happened. They got to me. I do not know what bargain we made or what you think you owe me, but I am asking you for one last thing. Not as a federal agent, but as a father. My daughter, Emma, she is like me. She is stubborn, and she is smart, and she will not let this go. If I do not make it, I need you to keep her alive, and I need you to keep her honest. Do not protect her from the truth. Protect her asterisk with asterisk it. She will choose the light. I know she will. Even when she knows the light burns. Keep her safe. D.H." I read the letter 3 times. My hands were shaking. He had known. He had seen the end coming. And he had not trusted his own agency. He had trusted a gangster. He had trusted Luca. He had trusted me. I printed the letter. I folded it carefully and put it in my pocket. I walked back to my window. I looked out at the harbor, at the ships moving in the setting sun. Boston was breathing. The city felt normal again, its heartbeat steady. But I was breathing deeper. The air was still thick with the smell of salt. But it was not just the ocean anymore. It was the smell of survival. Our wedding was quiet. We did not want a spectacle. We chose a tiny, ancient stone church on the coast, north of the city, where the only sounds were the wind and the waves crashing on the rocks below. Kara was there. She was my maid of honor. She held my hand as I got ready, and her grip was strong, her eyes were clear. She was painting again. She was healing. Mason was Luca's best man. He stood next to him at the altar, looking profoundly uncomfortable in a tuxedo, his limp a permanent, defiant part of him. He complained that the flowers were a tactical liability, but I saw him nod once to Luca, a short, sharp gesture of respect. Father Miguel officiated. His words were not about magic or destiny. They were about choice and work and the tough, daily act of commitment. In the very last pew, sitting alone, was Evelyn Hart. She wore a simple gray suit. She watched the ceremony, her face impossible to read. When it was over, she gave me a single, small nod. The watch was over. The circle was closed. We stood at the altar, and Luca took my hand. His was warm and steady. I looked up at the light streaming through the stained glass window. I thought of my father. "I am not forgiving your death," I whispered, so low that only the ghosts could hear. "I am dismantling it. I finished the work. Dad." Luca squeezed my hand. I turned to look at him. He was not a prince. I was not a damsel. We were 2 survivors. We were 2 people who had walked through an inferno and found each other on the other side, covered in soot but still standing. Father Miguel smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "You may—" We turned, and together, we walked out of the dark church, stepping into the bright, blinding and beautiful sunlight. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where in the world you are listening from, so please leave a comment below and share your thoughts. Be sure to subscribe to my channel, Mafia Boss Stories, and like this video. It truly helps. And if you want to see more stories like this one, please support us by hitting the hype button to help this story be heard by more people.